All right, is it working? Yeah, it's on. It's on. All right, so today we're gonna look at a Harry Potter figure. Well, that's kind of new. Yeah, we haven't really done that on the channel. So I figured we'd start this off by looking at the figure for Professor Quirrell. Oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah, maybe we could take a look at the box first, right? So on the box here, it says Lord Voldemort, which is technically true. Really, it's Professor Quirrell. But as you can see with the figure, he's got Lord Voldemort on the back of his head, just like in the movie and the books. Well, that's pretty cool. And it tells you about that on the box here, where it shows you how you can move his face around and stuff. So that's kind of cool. Nice little detail. The figure comes with Quirrell's signature garlic, since, as you know, he had a run-in with a vampire and a bit of trouble with a hag. So he's definitely afraid of vampires and keeps garlic with him at all times. Now, I figure since we got the figure, maybe we could do a little background or overview of the character. Well, that'd be pretty cool. Yeah, so Professor Quirrell, Professor Quirinus Quirrell, he attended Hogwarts as a child. All right, go on. He was sorted into Ravenclaw House, which is unique because most of the villains tend to come from Slytherin House. Not that all Slytherins are bad, they just have an overrepresentation of dark wizards and witches. Anyway, Quirrell got sorted into Ravenclaw House. He got very, very high grades in almost all of his classes, if not all of them. So he was an exceptional student, but he never really got any significant recognition for his work, right? So he did very well in school, but there wasn't really much praise or recognition or acknowledgement of it. And then on top of this, he also got bullied a lot, because he was a very kind of nervous, timid, kind of shy, underconfident person, despite his academic brilliance, which actually just may have made the bullying worse, right? So he had really bad nerves as a kid. He got bullied a lot. And unfortunately, the bullying continued into adulthood. So, on top of this sort of lack of recognition, he eventually did become like a Muggle studies professor, which I personally think is a good job. But for somebody with Quirrell's, grades, he probably had higher ambition than that, right? And to add insult to injury, he got bullied a lot from his students, right? So Quirrell, lifelong experience of bullying, and it definitely affected him in a negative way because Quirrell eventually ends up seeking out Lord Voldemort. Now, he's pretty smart because he figured out where Voldemort was, right? And the Ministry apparently couldn't do that, so he figured out that Voldemort was in the Black Forest, Albania. So he goes to the Black Forest searching for Voldemort. His game plan is he's either going to capture Voldemort and become a hero and be recognized as this like brilliant wizard who defeated the dark wizard Voldemort, or he's going to strike some kind of deal with Voldemort for some kind of forbidden knowledge or power. So the thing about Quirrell is, he was very resentful of the disrespect and the bullying that he experienced, and he started to develop a sort of fascination with the dark arts and with black magic, right? Now, this started out as academic and theoretical, but, in secret, he actually wanted to practice it, to become feared and respected, right? So, searching out Voldemort, he might have told himself, oh, I'm going to beat Voldemort and become a hero, but really in the back of his mind, he had other plans, and apparently so did Voldemort. So, Quirrell goes to seek out Voldemort. He finds him in his disembodied kind of spirit form, and Quirrell is completely overpowered by Voldemort. Even in his weakened state, Voldemort easily overtakes Quirrell, and Quirrell becomes his servant. Now, at that time, he doesn't have Voldemort on the back of his head yet. That comes later. So eventually, Voldemort tasks Quirrell with breaking into Gringotts to steal the Philosopher's Stone. And when Quirrell fails, then Voldemort decides, I have to keep a closer eye on you. And that's when he attaches himself to the back of Quirrell's head. Now, once that happens, Quirrell has to drink unicorn blood to sustain himself because being possessed by Voldemort in this way or sharing a body with him drains your energy, right? And so Voldemort was before he possessed Quirrell, he was actually just sort of like this misty kind of spirit form, and he was bound to the earth by his Horcruxes. So, he should have died, but instead he stayed, earthbound, and he just had to go from like animal to animal, possessing them, draining their life force, moving on to the next one. So getting Quirrell as a vessel was a huge step up for Voldemort, but not such a good deal for Quirrell. Now, Quirrell does get cold feet after this, and he makes these kind of feeble efforts to resist, but Quirrell is not strong enough to defy Voldemort. And the thing about Quirrell is he's very good at like academic kind of book work, paperwork kind of stuff. But his practical magic was said to be relatively lacking. Now, there are examples in the movie where he actually is shown to be a pretty powerful wizard, right? So, like, when he's casting that jinx on Harry's broom to try and, like, throw him off and kill him, or when he kind of summons the fire and the ropes with, like, without even using a wand, right? That's pretty impressive stuff. But it's hard to say, like, how much of that was Quirrell's practical skills and how much of that was Voldemort, right? So, anyways, Quirrell comes into the service of Voldemort, and nobody suspects him, and he even, is self-aware of this. He says in the movie, and I think in the books, next to Snape, who would suspect poor stuttering Professor Quirrell? Now, Quirrell's stuttering and, his kind of meek persona are an exaggeration of his original personality. And at that point, when he's got Voldemort on the back of his head and he's stuttering and acting that way, that's really just a ruse. That the stutter was fake. All this was an act, basically to throw everybody off, right? Now, Hagrid comments on it and says, well, Quirrell was afraid of his own subject, and they attribute that to a run-in that he had with a vampire, and, Quirrell maintains belief in that by, having garlic on him at all times and, like, surrounding his classroom in garlic, right? His lessons were considered a joke, mostly because of his stuttering, but even before that, he was just, never really taken seriously by his students. We don't really see too many spells that Quirrell taught. Most of our experience with Quirrell would be like when he was the first year Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher for Harry. So he taught him like Lumos, Flipendo, Vermilius, and he dealt with the Curse of the Bogies. We don't know what he taught the older students, although one of his classes for some reason involves an iguana. Now, if I was making the figure, I would replace the garlic with the iguana. I think that would be awesome. Everybody would get that reference. And if I could change the figure in any other way, I would change the color of Voldemort's face, right? So that it's the same kind of skin color as Quirrell has here. I think that would help it to kind of blend in better, Otherwise, it kind of looks like he's got some kind of illness on the back of his neck. Mostly the turban does cover it, but if I could extend it down a little bit more, I would. Or even if you had the option to take the turban off, I think it would be better. I do like that the head can swivel around. So we don't see Quirrell and Voldemort do that in the books or the movie, where his like tilts his head like an owl or anything, but you can do that with the figure, right? So you actually can twist it around. Let's see if I can get it going for you to show you. And you can make like Voldemort the dominant face, right? So that's kind of cool. It's just fun to mention too that in the books, this wasn't in the movie. There's a scene where like Fred and George like bewitch a snowball to like bounce out the back of Quirrell's head. So just as like a fun note, that pretty much means they were hitting Voldemort in the face with the snowball the whole time. And I mean, other than that, we get the iconic scene where he runs into the Great Hall and he goes, "Troll in the dungeon! Troll in the dungeon! Thought you ought to know." And then he faints, right? And this is the Defense Against the Dark Arts teachers. So really, he was not widely respected or regarded as a good teacher by his students. He's probably better as a Muggle studies professor because that's what he did before he taught Defense Against the Dark Arts. And I think it's sad that this character ended up as a villain, because I think that he went through a lot of horrible experiences with bullying. Doesn't justify his actions because he literally becomes like somebody who's trying to murder a child. So that's irredeemably bad. We can't really forgive that. But, I kind of think like maybe this character in some ways you could almost kind of feel sorry for him in a way, or like maybe there would have been some kind of way to redeem him. But unfortunately for Quirrell, when he tries to kill Harry, touching Harry causes him pretty much to disintegrate, right? Because he's hosting Voldemort, and Voldemort can't, he just can't handle the protective love that Harry's mother put on him when she sacrificed herself to save baby Harry from Voldemort, right? So Quirrell, very interesting character. Pretty much the whole book and movie, they make you think Snape is the bad guy, and really it is Professor Quirrell. Wow, that's a pretty interesting character. Yeah. So I definitely like to see like any kind of Quirrell merchandise. He's a pretty cool character. Would have been nice if they hadn't killed him off. Maybe they could find some way to keep him around in the story or redeem him as a good guy. But unfortunately for Quirrell, he did pass away. And yeah, that's it for him, right? Let me know what you think about the character. I think the figure is pretty good. The only changes I would make is I would replace this with the iguana. I'd have the turban kind of, come down more and have it possible to take it off. And, just as a little note here, he's got like this cool little sweater vest, so you can kind of see what he's wearing there.